Now, let's talk about the contemporary Muslims, because actually there are many similarities between the contemporary Muslims and the Jews of
100%.
the
100%.
first century. And actually this was something that was prophesied, Muslims believe, by the Prophet Muhammad. There's actually really quite clearly that the sins that affected the Jews at the times of the Jesus would be repeated in the Muslims at the time of the second coming of the Messiah, such that it's said there'll be like two shoes. They'll pair up so closely together that the Jewish condition would be reflected very almost perfectly, almost completely with the Muslims later on. And of course, that the Quran says that Moses, peace be upon him, was the prototype of Muhammad, peace be upon him. That Moses was a great law-bearing prophet, and in the 14th century after him, Jesus came, the Messiah, who would reform the extreme beliefs of the Jews once they had lost the spirit of their religion. And so one can very easily infer that the second coming of the Messiah in the Muslim dispensation would also be in the 14th century after Muhammad, peace be upon him, once the Muslims had become very extreme in their understanding of things, very hard-hearted, and have lost their spirit of their religion. So
and the best evidence of the fact that Muslims have reached that point is the politicization of Islam. Just like the Jews at the time of Jesus had basically politicized their religion, they were looking for a political solution, a religious solution to a political problem. Okay. Yeah. Similarly, Muslims today, Islam has variations of practices as political states. Okay. Mm-hmm. And, you have states which have taken on particular religious positions. So Saudi is an exclusively Sunni state. Iran is largely and exclusively Shia state. Okay. And you have other Muslim countries as well that then line up along these axes of sectarian axes. Okay. So now this was not the case 100 years ago. Yeah. It simply wasn't. Okay. Yeah. So this has all happened in the last 120, 130 years.
But the seeds were there in the ideologies of many of the Muslims even 150 years ago. In terms
of the seeds were there, but it's not actually the case that.
But you were saying the manifestation,
yes,
in the extreme politicization of religion only happened in the last century. And people may say, oh well, it's America's role, and they've gone in, corrupted these countries, and they have their invested interests in holding up the Saudis and all the various dictatorships. And I think we'd agree, that's all very true. But if one is not corrupted from within, you can't be corrupted from without. So I don't think we can excuse the Muslims and the Muslim leaders themselves from taking responsibility for their beliefs and their actions. It is a two-way thing.
It's only an unhealthy body that gets infected from an external source. Okay, that's a fact.
Yeah. So what is the contemporary Orthodox, or let's say mainstream Muslim belief about what's going to happen with the second coming of Jesus? Can you spell that out again for us? Because I think that's very important.
Yeah, so basically the Muslims believe in general that two figures will appear, towards the end times, and that there are major and minor signs that would be fulfilled, and the Prophet Muhammad prophesied lots of these signs. In fact, I'd say all of them have now been fulfilled, which is why Muslims are like freaking out. They're like, the Messiah is going to come any day now, because these signs are not minor. They're not like vague prophecies. I mean, one of them, for example, is that towards one of the signs of the hour, it's called. These are called the signs of the hour. The hour is coming, right? One of the signs is that goat herding Bedouin Arabs will compete with one another in constructing who can construct the tallest buildings.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that is such a specific sign, which has been filled so specifically with the states of the UAE, Bahrain, etc. You'd have to be a complete moron, frankly, to think that hasn't been fulfilled. It's clearly been fulfilled. Yeah. You'd also have to be, you've got to ask yourself some serious questions about, this man clearly knew some stuff that, he could not possibly have known himself. So, I mean, another one of those signs, for example, was that that there'll be a new form of transportation in that age, which will eat fire and breathe smoke. and it will travel like a cloud being driven by a wind, that its length would be 60 yards between its ears. It was described as a donkey with ears, that the earth would be folded up for it, that the sea would be ankle deep for it, that it would bear mountains of goods on its back. So clearly talking about a new form of transportation that would make transportation much easier, and that would basically shorten like a month's journey into a day is another one of the references.
And explicitly, this would be at a time when the she-camel would be abandoned as a form of transportation, and this new form of transport would happen. So, I mean, he obviously didn't have the vocabulary to say cars and trains. These things wouldn't have been understood in that time. They likened it as to a donkey, but gave all these characteristics which are clearly talking about modern forms of travel. So what you're saying is that there are many signs of the coming of the Messiah that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, spoke about as happening in this age, and therefore Muslims, those who understand these things, and generally there's a sense that this is the era of the second coming of the Messiah, right?
Yeah,
so they believe in that, but their expectation is similar to the Jews, right? Because they also believe that he will be that a bloody Messiah will come, so and that a Mahdi will come, and then they will team up. And what will they do? What is going to be their behavior?
So their belief is that, in general, the Mahdi will fight a battle, okay? That the Mahdi will fight a battle on behalf of the Muslims. The Mahdi will be an imam from among the Muslims, will be guided by God. He'll somehow know that he's the Mahdi, and he will lead the Muslims and armies against the Christians, okay? And he will lose. And then at that point in that major war, again, it's another war we're talking about. At that point in the major war, the Messiah will then descend from heaven, and that will be Jesus from 2,000 years ago.
Now, you're saying this is what the prophecy says. Is that literally what prophecy says, or is this an interpretation of
it? No. This is what the Muslims believe. Okay.
Right. So this isn't actually in the text of the prophecies.
There are some prophecies that do talk about this, but
not
frankly,
in the way that you've just said.
No, there are some prophecies that talk about this exactly in the way I've just said. In terms of a war, etc., but they are completely self-contradictory. Okay, many of them were invented at a time when Muslims were it was 400 years after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, and Muslims were then effectively creating narrations to justify the expansion of their empire against another person's empire, right? And they were saying the Mahdi is about to come, and there's going to be, he's going to support my war against you. Okay.
So in some traditions, these kinds of things appear, but they're not. We wouldn't necessarily call them prophecies.
We wouldn't call them prophecies. They're not authentic, because you look, for example, at Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, which are the two most authentic books of hadith. These prophecies don't appear at all, and the reason is because, in fact, you don't even find reference to the Mahdi, because Imam Bukhari knew that the concept of the Mahdi has been so utterly twisted, because it's been already politicized and used innumerable times through false narrations. The only mention you find of what the coming of the Messiah will do, because these, a lot of ISIS and a lot of general Muslims, I should say, actually, who don't hold extremist attitudes, but do hold this extremist theology in the back of their mind, which is that the Mahdi will fight a war against the Christians, and then the Messiah will come and he will give victory to the Muslims by leading that fight against the Christians and defeat them. Okay? That's all belied by the fact that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that when the Messiah comes, he will yada'ul harb. He'll put an end to religious war. Right?
Yeah. And so when faced with Gog and Magog, God says, don't fight them.
Yes, exactly.
Don't fight them. Take refuge in the mountain and pray.
Exactly. So the most reliable references we have in the most reliable texts of Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim,
which are books of traditions,
right, and the most authoritative, they say the complete opposite of what is believed by the majority of Muslims today. And what is believed by the majority of Muslims today is actually a perversion of what the Christians and the Jews believed, because the Christians and Jews entered into Islam and carried with them a lot of those kinds of beliefs, which are actually peripheral beliefs, not related to the core doctrines of the religion. Okay? And so just like the Christians believe that Jesus ascended to heaven and he will come down again and grant dominion to the Christians, they brought that belief into Islam, and Muslims started to believe that Jesus also ascended to heaven and that he will also return to earth and that he will grant dominion to the Muslims.
Yeah. So before we discuss that point, and we're coming towards the end of this discussion here, let's be clear then what we're saying. The mainstream view of Muslim scholars today, in terms of their interpretation of these prophecies of the end times or the latter days, is that you will have two leaders that come. So one, the Imam Mahdi, who will come from the Muslims themselves. He will somehow know he's the Imam Mahdi, and he will fight some great battles. And literally Jesus Christ of Nazareth is going to descend literally from the sky, literally from heaven above us. And he's going to team up with him, and you're going to have lots of bloody wars, and then the day of judgment. So basically, it's almost identical to the belief of the rapture, but with you just take out Christians, put Muslims in there, right?
Basically,
and that's an incredibly. It should be a very unsettling point, because your expectations, the point you've made in many of your articles over the years, your expectation of
it's not
divine.
my point.
Sure. Well, yeah, but you have put it in many articles. Is the
It
point
was the point of
founder
Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, founder of the Ahmadiyya community, in the opening introduction chapter to a book called Jesus in India. Yeah. And you have to ask yourself the question, why did he talk about jihad exclusively in the opening chapter to a book on the real life of Jesus? It's because he, in 1905, understood the relationship between terrorism, extremism, and the concept of Jesus' second coming. Like, people still don't understand this idea.
Yeah, and that's the book Jesus in India by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the founder of the Ahmadiyya community. If you're wondering who that is, that was him, and he's the founder of the community, the Muslim community to which we belong. And the kinds of things that we're saying is obviously representative of the beliefs of the Ahmadiyya community. And
guess what? That's the face of the second coming.
Right.
Congratulations, everybody! You missed it.
Well, I mean.
Well, you missed it, but there's still chance, still chance.
Where, obviously we in the Ahmadiyya community are looking to spread this message, but I want to make this more explicit, because the point that I was making is that your expectation of divine behavior, which Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the individual we just showed, your expectation of divine behavior colors your own behavior, because morality ultimately stems from your conception of God. And,
the highest ideal. The highest ideal.
God is the highest ideal. Human behavior should seek to emulate that. So if you have this belief that God is going to come and murder people, or rather that God is going to send someone who's going to come and start murdering people for not believing and start fighting all these bloody wars, then it essentially sanctions your own behavior in that way, because you can say, look, I was following the divine mold. This is how you do things, and therefore this is how we do things. So it's actually a very important socio-political thing as well, to try and dispel some of these myths and to dispel some of these ideas, which I think we would stress are not at all founded in the original religions. Especially, we can make the case extremely well for Islam, which says that there is no compulsion in matters of faith in chapter 2. There's to you your religion, to me my religion, and which fundamentally also says that Jesus died a natural death on earth, right?
Yeah. So the Quran clearly states that Jesus is dead. That Jesus did not ascend to heaven. It says that God exalted him to God himself, which is completely different to saying God, he ascended him to heaven. And it also states explicitly that he is dead. The Quran in Mirza Ghulam Ahmad presented 30 verses of the Quran which demonstrate that Jesus has died a natural death. And in fact, Jesus has been stated as having died a natural death more times than all the other prophets combined. It's like God really wanted to emphasize the point. Jesus is dead.
Right. And that's because it would have this this immense importance later on in religious history. We can put some links below for any Muslims that in particular who are interested in the verses which speak about the death of Jesus, peace be upon him. Like every other prophet, this isn't some kind of slight toward Jesus, right?
Yeah, of course not. The best of prophets from the Muslim perspective, Muhammad, peace be on him, is dead.
Yeah,
he's in paradise. He's not on earth.